Let's start with the AFC North. Baltimore Ravens. I'm going to read off some numbers here first, and then we dive into some of the specifics.
Yes,
PFF
sir.
Power Ranking heading into 2021 NFL season, the number 5 overall team. Their PFF projected wins are 9.8, whereas DraftKings has their over-under win total at 11.0. Playoff odds sit at 60% in 2021, the 6th best odds of any team. That is what I have from a number standpoint.
Yes, and I will be giving the fatal flaw. The biggest reason to be concerned about all these respective teams heading into this season. To me, for the Ravens, it's the passing attack. It's the fact that Lamar Jackson in the playoffs has earned a 58.2 passing grade, averaged 209 passing yards a game in his career, and 13 points per game as an offense. And yes, they drafted Rashad Bateman in the first round, but he's hurt. Your status quo in your passing attack coming into this season, you have these same weapons that you did. Now, Rashad Bateman will come back, but he's still a rookie wide receiver. Relying on him to make that difference, I don't know if it's going to. So basically, you have to hope that Lamar Jackson, year 4, looks like a different passer against better defenses. Because
with a still not so great receiving core.
If you just look at his splits against teams that play in Ohio versus teams that don't play in Ohio, it's kind of concerning. It is. It straight up is. He has feasted on the Bengals and Browns in his career and has graded out as an average quarterback against every other team in the NFL.
So is that a shot at the Browns and Bengals defenses?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, for sure it is. They sucked the past couple of years until Browns last season were fine.
Where are you ranking their skill group with Rashad Bateman sideline? Marquise Brown, Sammy Watkins, James Prochet, Mark Andrews, and Gus Edwards. That group is hodgepodge from a receiving core standpoint. You love my hodgepodge
again.
You love my hodgepodge. I do think the from J.K. Dobbins to Gus Edwards is not a massive change, obviously, even though, with PFF and how we view the running back position. But I do think this receiving core still isn't good. And we still need to see a lot more from Marquise Brown before we feel all that confident he can be a true number 1 in the NFL.
Well, it's just Marquise Brown doesn't fit to what Lamar Jackson does well.
Yeah.
Like Marquise Brown is a vertical go ball outside the numbers threat. That's not Lamar Jackson's game. Straight up hasn't been where he's accurate with the football. He's accurate over the middle of the field, tight windows there, throwing with anticipation. That's his game. That's why Mark Andrews just crushes in that offense. He is tailor-made for what Lamar Jackson does. Rashad Bateman should be. When he comes back, he should be able to do those things. But until he proves it, it's TBD. So I do think they are improved in that regard, but still not quite where you want to be. And they take some steps back along the defensive line. Obviously, no Yannick Ngakoue, no Matthew Judon.
I was going to argue that their defense will still be
good.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been top 2 in scoring last 2 seasons. Mm-hmm. They are a good defense. You don't go from top 2 in scoring with the secondary they have to trash. But I don't think you can. We've said defense can be fickle. I don't think you can necessarily say for sure they're going to be top 2 again.
Final question. Would you take the over 11.0 wins or the under 11.0 wins? Right now, PFF projects them at 9.8.
I take the under. I like the under just because this division. Mm-hmm. The division's too tough, man. The division is, I'll say it, it's the best division in football. It is top to bottom. Very, very good. You have 3. At least, I think the Steelers are getting maybe a little underrated
Absolutely.
at this
point. Sam Monson wrote a piece for PFF.com, targeting, I think it comes out next week, highlighting why the Pittsburgh Steelers, after that kind of late season collapse, have gotten to the point where they're underrated. I think they're going to see some positive regression from Big Ben. The offensive line is still a concern, but hasn't played.
We'll get to
that. We'll get to that.
All right. But three top 13 teams in the PFF Power Rankings. That's a tough division.
Absolutely. All right. Cleveland Browns are next on my list. The 9th ranked team on PFF's Power Rankings, projected at 10.5 wins, and DraftKings has their over-under at 10.5 wins. They have the 5th best playoff odds at 70%. And I'll say this, on paper, have one of the more complete rosters in the NFL, offensively and defensively. Up there, I'd argue, with the Bills and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's how good defensively and offensively this Browns team is.
The only reason you wouldn't put them in the same conversation, because they should be in the same conversation as the Chiefs and Bills. They straight up went to Arrowhead and were very close to beating the Chiefs. Now, it took Patrick Mahomes getting injured, but they were right there neck and neck, even when Patrick Mahomes did get injured. They were right there with them. So this team deserves to be in that conversation. They have improved on seemingly both sides of the ball from what they were throwing out in that game against the Chiefs with Odell Beckham returning, and defensively all they added this offseason. It should be in that conversation. The only thing is, and it's the fatal flaw, Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham. That combo. Why hasn't it worked? No, that is for God and Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham to decide, to understand why. I don't know why it hasn't worked. But I mean, even in that game that Odell Beckham gets hurt, Baker Mayfield starts, 0 for 6 with a pick, and the pick was to Odell, and then doesn't have an incompletion besides the spike the rest of the game. Something is off between those two. Has been off. The connection has not been there. One of the lowest passer ratings for a number one target or wide receiver on a team in the NFL over the last 2 seasons. Why is that? Again, we don't know. But it has not worked there in Cleveland. So maybe it works this year. Maybe it was just the fact that it was Freddie Kitchens the first year and that Baker was just getting his feet wet in Kevin Stefanski's offense next year. Maybe that is why. And we just didn't get to see it with Odell healthy, and he'll come back and they'll light the world on fire. Maybe that will be the case. But until that does happen, I'm not ready to put them in that conversation, like I said, with the Bills, with the Chiefs, but they really should be talent-wise.
DraftKings has Odell Beckham Jr. at 925.5 receiving yards over under. We project him at 988. Is there not a happy medium with Odell? I feel like you have talked about it a ton and that Baker just has not played well with Odell, and the data backs it up 100%. But is there a chance that they're just okay? Like everyone, I don't think it has to be, for them to be Super Bowl competitive, I don't think Odell has to light the NFL on fire. Like he just has to be not awful. Like the Baker-Odell tandem can't be awful for this team to be Super Bowl competitive. And I just think there is a chance, a good chance, that they have a happy medium and Odell doesn't lead the NFL in receiving yards, but actually returns to competent play.
Yeah. I mean, it should. There's no reason why it shouldn't. But again, until I see it, I can believe it.
Moving to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Wait, we're not going to give that over/under win total? You're not going to give a take on it?
Sorry. I will. PFF wins at 10.5. DraftKings has it at 10.5 over/under. It's going to be under season on this pod. I can feel it.
Going over 10.5.
Wow.
I'm all in. Browns are... We're going to do full, once we get through all the divisions, full predictions, but they're my AFC North prediction.
So then when you argue, against PFF's power rankings, Ravens right now number 5, Browns at number 9, that the Browns are a better team than Baltimore.
Well, I mean, yeah, if I'm picking them, yeah. But yes, I think Browns are a top 5 team in the NFL.
Pittsburgh Steelers, power ranking number 13 team in the NFL. I think people who follow the PFF social media accounts maybe thought they'd be bottom 5. They're not. Number 13 team in the NFL. PFF wins at 7.7. According to our projections, DraftKings has them at 8.5 for an over-under win total. Their playoff odds sit at 29%, tied for 26th in the NFL. Where I want to start with Pittsburgh is, should this passing game not be good? Like, everyone, craps on Ben Roethlisberger for low average depth of target and gets the ball out too quick and never is, chasing these explosive plays. I love this receiving core, even with Juju Smith-Schuster, who I'm not as high on as others are, but like Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster is a top flight, I call top 10 receiving core in the NFL. And Big Ben, as bad as he looked last year, unless he completely disintegrates, which I don't know if we see happening, I think this Big Ben, like you said, the Pittsburgh Steelers are underrated.
See, I'm not so much as worried about Big Ben himself as I am worried about the combination of Big Ben and that offensive line, because you have Chukwuma Okorafor and Zach Banner as your tackles. I think the interior is going to be all right. You got Kevin Dotson, Trey Turner, Kendrick Green. I think you're fine there. Like, that's serviceable. But Chukwuma Okorafor got dogged this preseason. Zach Banner, have not seen, there's a reason that he couldn't even start over Chukwuma Okorafor last year.
Banner is also starting the season on the injured reserve and will miss the first 3 weeks of the season.
Okay. Well, shit. Who's the starting right tackle then?
Not great.
Not great, Bob. It's the offensive line there combined with Ben Roethlisberger, because you could see Roethlisberger, when a guy gets hurt, which he did, as a massive injury where you're out for a season, mentally, it can change you. You can be afraid of getting hurt. And I thought last season he played as if he didn't want to get hit. And it was like when Derek Carr came back from that ankle, you just look like a different guy under pressure for a little bit. Now, is it going to be the case again this year? TBD. I'm not exactly sure, but he was playing football like a guy who was trying not to get hurt again last year. You can't play like that in the NFL, especially, again, behind this offensive line. If that's how he's going to play, it could go south quickly. I'm not going to call him washed up, but I just think that mentally, that is where he is right now. So,
especially though, I'll add too, when you're in such a good division, you can't afford to rely on defense and be conservative offensively. I think the options they have at right tackle with Banner out for at least 3 weeks, Joe Haig and Dan Moore Jr., the rookie fourth rounder, who actually graded really well this preseason, but still going down to your backup offensive lineman on what is right now, according to PFF, a 31st ranked offensive line in the NFL. That is probably the fatal flaw, right? The fatal flaw, as you highlighted, over not Big Ben, not the defense, regressing from last year. It is this offensive line.
Yeah, and I would even drill a little deeper and just say these tackles, man. The tackles are pass protection. Is what I got to coin that phrase. Tackles are pass protection. You have two good tackles, you have good pass protection for the most part, because not a lot of you can kind of piece together guards and centers.
Offensive line Twitter wants you dead.
I know, but if you have two good tackles, it's like kind of like the Chiefs the past handful of years. They've been throwing out a mishmash of guards and centers, Lauren Duvernay, Tardif, whatever, like guys who are they found off the scrap heap, but it worked because you have Mitchell Schwartz and Eric Fisher, basically, who you can trust to win one-on-one every time, and you don't have to chip, you don't have to have tight ends stay in, you don't have to do these other things that will bring your offense to its knees or kind of change the structure of your offense. You have two tackles that you can count on to operate. So that's how I feel, and I feel the opposite way about the Steelers' offensive tackles.
I think the data backing that take is also that the worst guard or center in the NFL allows 30 pressures in a single season, whereas the worst offensive tackle in the NFL allow 80 plus, 90 plus. You can have legitimate liabilities at tackle if they aren't good, and I would argue that the Steelers are not. Moving forward to the Cincinnati Bengals.
Give the over under DK wins.
I suck. 7.7 PFF wins is what we're projecting. DraftKings has it at 8.5. Over or under 8.5 wins, Mike?
Over 8.5 wins.
Wow.
Because it's still an elite defense. It is still a top three. Like, I feel, we talked about the Ravens being number two in scoring defense last year. I believe it was number 2. Steelers are going to be still in the top 5. They are top to bottom, a top 2 to 3 D line in the NFL. You've got Joe Schobert for pennies to pair with Devin Bush, who comes back, and you still have a secondary. Hayden Fitzpatrick, you still have enough playmakers in that secondary to get by to where I think that can get you in the building, especially with the wide receiver talent they have. Like, this team is good enough to go over 8.5.